The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Since many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the events that have been fulfilled among us, just as those who were eyewitnesses from the beginning and ministers of the word have handed them down to us, I too have decided, after investigating everything accurately and new, to write it down in an orderly sequence for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may realize the certainty of the teachings you have received. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news of him spread throughout the whole region. He taught in their synagogues and was praised by all. He came to Nazareth, where he had grown up, and went according to his custom into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. He stood up to read and was handed a scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll and found the passage where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring glad tidings to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord." Rolling up the scroll, he handed it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all in the synagogue looked intently at him. He said to them, "Today the scripture passage is fulfilled in your hearing." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Continuing on the theme from last week, I still want us asking that question, what more can we do? What more can we do? It's a wonderful question to just come back to time and time again. If you weren't here last week because of the snow and the ice, please do bother to go and watch the video from last week's homily. It's just the homily, it doesn't have the readings. It's kind of an odd angle because it's where I could put my phone and get the picture because even the camera guy couldn't get in last week. But what more can we do is such an important question to ask. I'm going to keep my homily a little on the short side because I'm asking a parishioner to speak at the end of Mass. Please, if you're of those who tend to miss the final blessing, stick around for the final blessing this time, just out of respect for him. But what more can we do? The beginning of Luke's Gospel starts off in a very interesting way. He starts off by saying, many people have already started writing down the events of Jesus Christ's life. Most of us would just say, all right, good, it's handled, somebody's got it, I'm going to go on my way. But that's not what Luke does. Luke says, so I've decided to do that same thing. I'm just going to do it my way. His way, Luke being the physician of St. Paul, was an educated man. So what did he do? He did it the way an educated man would. He investigated and tried to put things down in a sequence that is probably more accurate to the historical flow of events. Mark's Gospel, which Luke is probably aware of from all that we can tell academically, Mark's Gospel is very much kind of haphazardly, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, not necessarily in the order that they happened. It was just trying to compile the different events of Jesus' life. Luke's trying to put it in order. Matthew, it's not clear that whether Luke had seen Matthew's Gospel or not. Most people think that he didn't. But if he did, he would have seen in Matthew's Gospel a Gospel that's compiled to try to show how Jesus fulfilled the Jewish expectations of the Messiah. Much of the Matthew's Gospel is talking about how Jesus fulfilled the Old Testament. That's not Luke's aim. It may come in here and there, but Luke's real aim is to try to have a sequence that tells you the order of how these things happen. What's he doing? What he can. I have something to offer if I do what I can. Luke's gospel, it's kind of clear from the way he's writing, it sounds like there were a lot of people that were writing down what Jesus did. But after all this time, who do we remember? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If Luke had said, somebody else already has this, somebody else is already doing this, we would not have Luke's gospel, which is where we get our prayer, the Hail Mary. That beautiful prayer is citing the Hail Mary. There are several different prayers that we get from Luke's gospel. May we not be afraid of somebody else already doing something. Because there's so much more that can be done when we come alongside them and say, I can do something too. I can do something too. What is it that you can do? Each one of us should ask daily, what can I do today? We hear Jesus unrolling the scroll and reading the prophet Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because He's anointed me to bring glad tidings to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord. Who are the poor that we are being sent to as St. Bernards? Who are the poor each one of us is being called to serve? Who are the captives we're supposed to bring liberty to? Who are the blind that could recover sight if we just reach out to them? Who are the oppressed that we could set free? And how can we make this a year acceptable to the Lord? How can I do these things? How is God calling me to do more?